بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم إلى قيام يوم الدين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي أما بعد Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Tonight is the eve of the 15th of the month of Ramadan, Mubarak, and that is, of course, the eve of the birth of our second Imam, Imam Hasan al-Mujtaba alayhi salatu wassalam. My congratulations and best wishes to all mu'mineen and mu'minat on this very blessed and very happy occasion. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us as a gift on this day of celebration, the intercession and the prayers of Imam Hasan alayhi salam and all of the members of Ahlul Bayt. And may he bring us with them in our worldly life and in our eternal life in the hereafter. Today I would like to continue the discussion that we began, which was the meaning of jihad in the Quran, and in particular jihadun nafs, the struggle of the soul. Yesterday, as we explained, the logic of Islam demands that jihad should be primarily about what is within you, simply because jihad is a struggle against injustice and a struggle for justice. And injustice and justice is not something that exists in the external world. It is something that exists within our soul. If we are just in our own selves and our own character and our own morals, then we will live just lives and we will establish justice in society. And if we are not just in and of ourselves, then we will not be able to establish justice in society, no matter how much we may verbally advocate for just policies, no matter how much we may politically advocate for just policies. But if our life and our soul is not just, then that will not be a lasting justice or a true justice, and it might not even be sincere. So the logic of Islam is that we should become adil and avoid being zalim, and then we can establish adl and we can eradicate dhulm within society. Then the question arises, what happened that this insight was lost? What happened that jihad became a military struggle? What happened that the struggle for inner justice was not emphasized, and many Muslims thought that it is outward justice that is important? This was the result of Saqifa. When people look at the history of Islam, we should never imagine that the debate between Ahlul Bayt and the followers of Ahlul Bayt and the followers of the Saqifa policy, or if we want to phrase it a different way, the debate between the followers of Imamat and the followers of Khilafat. Khilafat as it was used and understood by those people who established a government in Saqifa. That debate was not about which person should be the successor of the Prophet. It was not a debate about whether the successor of the Prophet is Imam Ali alayhi salam or the successor of the Prophet is Abu Bakr. That is not at all the question. That is not what was disputed between Ahlul Bayt and their opponents. The dispute was, what is the nature of Islam? What is the nature of the succession of the Prophet? If the nature of the succession of the Prophet is to be a spiritual guidance, rooted in piety and rooted in knowledge, then of course, the person who is going to fulfill that role must be the most knowledgeable and must be the most pious person in the Muslim Ummah. There isn't any other possible view that you can have. When we want to choose a political leader, maybe we have an election. But if we want to choose the Surgeon General of the United States, if we want to choose somebody who is going to fulfill a legal role or a specialized role, then it can't just be an election. There has to be some competence, some qualification that comes first. And if there are a number of qualified people, maybe then we have an election among those candidates. But there is a difference between a political role and an administrative role and a role rooted in competence and qualifications. The professor of a particular subject in university is not chosen by democratic election. The chief of a particular department in a university or the chief of surgery in a hospital is not going to be chosen by democracy or popularity. They're going to be chosen on the basis of their qualifications. If the succession of the Prophet is a succession in a religious role and a spiritual role, then there can be no dispute and no debate that the most knowledgeable and the most pious person is to be the successor. If the succession of the Prophet is a political office, then it has to be somebody who is politically acceptable to the people. Maybe that person is not the most pious. Maybe the person is not the most qualified or knowledgeable. But if they are able to effectively govern, then they might be the best person to fulfill that role. So the question after the Prophet was not first and foremost about the person who is going to lead the Muslim Ummah after the Prophet. That was the question, but there was another question that came first, which is, what was it that the Prophet did? What was the mission of the Prophet? And what is the nature of the succession to the Prophet? And this question, if we answer it, will tell us who is the right candidate and what are the qualifications that that position should have. The Shia and Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salatu wasalam said, the Prophet was not a military ruler of the Muslim world. The Prophet was not a political administrator. It was not that Medina was the capital of the Islamic State. Medina was the capital of the Islamic Ummah as a religious community, as a spiritual community. Because the Muslims had a spiritual community and a religious community, they also came together socially and politically. But the source of that unity and that identity was not the shared Arab language or the shared economic or political interests of the Muslims. The glue that kept the Muslim Ummah together was the shared spiritual and religious identity, the orientation to Allah. And therefore, that ummah can continue to be an ummah and it can be held together and it can continue to fulfill its purpose on the basis of an imam who is the representation of the ilm and the taqwa that the Prophet taught. وَفَوْقَ كُلِّ ذِي عِلْمٍ عَلِيمٍ. Above everybody with knowledge, there is somebody with more knowledge, and that is the person who has authority, because that is the nature of Islam. For Saqifa, the logic was different. They said that the succession of the Prophet is a matter of the political administration of the Muslim world. And because Imam Ali was young, and because Imam Ali was unpopular among the Arab tribes whom he had fought and killed their heroes when he was defending Islam and they were opposing Islam, political leadership could go to the various Arab tribes. One day it would be Quraysh, one tribe of Quraysh, another time it would be another tribe of Quraysh. Abu Bakr was from Banu Taym, Umar was from Banu Adi, Uthman was from Banu Umayyah, and so they would all be happy that if today is the turn of somebody else, tomorrow will be our turn to be in political power. So they thought of the job of the successor of the Prophet to be to manage the Muslim army, to manage the administration of the Muslim state on an outward basis. And Ahlul Bayt said that that is not what creates the Muslim community, ummah identity. You need an alim, you need an imam who is rooted in the teachings of the Prophet, and by spreading those teachings of Islam, they can keep the heart of the Muslim ummah beating and thriving. And then, of course, Islamic society, when it is thriving, it will spread. Its message will spread. The borders of the Islamic State will expand because the Imam is keeping alive that same mission that the Prophet brought for us. So, to be very clear, the dispute between Sunni and Shia is not who is the successor of the Prophet. Many historians, many textbooks of Islam, they make this mistake. They say the Shia believe in a hereditary leadership and the Sunnis believe in a democratic leadership. And this makes it seem as if almost the non-Shi'i belief is much more modern, much more acceptable to people's sensibilities than the Shia view. That is not the case at all. The Shia view is that religious leadership belongs to those who are religiously qualified. And infallibility is a gift given by Allah, not just to the ma'soom, but to the entire ummah. It is a gift for me that there is an imam like Imam Ali, who can be my guide, who can be my role model, whose hadith and whose du'as I can read and I can learn from. As the Quran says, وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَن يَشْرِي نَفْسَهُ ابْتِغَاءَ مَرْضَاتِ اللَّهِ. Among the people there are those who have sold themselves to Allah. That was revealed according to narrations about Imam Ali when he slept on the bed of the Prophet and was willing to sacrifice himself to save the life of the Prophet. وَاللَّهُ رَؤُوفٌ بِالْعِبَادِ. And Allah is merciful to His servants. And one of those mercies of Allah is that He gave us people who sold themselves to the cause of Allah. The fact that Imam Ali sold himself for Islam is the ra'fah and the rahmah of Allah to us as an ummah. To have an imam like Imam Ali gives us the highest ideal of what we can try to be as a human being. That role model is a very, very powerful gift, the greatest gift that Allah could give anybody, much more valuable than any material gift, because it gives meaning to your life and it provides you the gate to salvation. If you understand the Shi'i view, learn from Ahlul Bayt about what Islam is, then you will see it is loyal to that teaching of the Prophet, that adl begins within your heart, dhulm has its origin within your heart, jihad is first and foremost a struggle of your heart, and then it is a struggle on the external sphere. But those Muslims who believed from Saqifa and according to the practice of the Khulafa, that the job of the Ummah after the Prophet is a political unity. They thought that the success of Islam is to apply the outward fiqh. So they took pride that our government is applying Sharia when it has the Islamic punishments. The ideal Islamic society is one where the hudud do not need to be applied because there is moral training for people, there is economic security for people, there is economic and political justice for people so that people do not need to steal. People do not feel that temptation to commit moral crimes. And therefore, those hudud will be very rarely applied or will become almost unheard of in Islamic society. And Islamic society is not Islamic because there are hudud punishments that are enacted. And Islamic society is Islamic when those crimes are reduced to a bare minimum because of the moral training of society and because of the economic and political and social justice that exists within society. The Khulafa treated Islam as a political identity. They took pride that they conquered new territories. They took pride in the application of the penal laws, the punishment laws, the hudud of Islam. Whereas those are just one small part of what Islam is about. That is not the standard by which Islamic practice is to be measured. The spread of the borders, the expansion of the borders of the Islamic empire is not a standard by which the success of Islam is to be measured. So the origin of the misunderstanding of jihad lies in the misunderstanding of what Islam is. Now, I don't want to say it's all black and white, and that for Ahlul Bayt, the political realm is not important, or for the Khulafa, there was no spiritual component in Islam. It's not about black and white, but it is about relative importance. Among the Khulafa, there was a greater importance placed upon the outward political element than on staying true and loyal to the spiritual teachings of Islam. And among the school of the Ahlul Bayt, there was a greater emphasis that was placed on the spiritual purity of Islam. And this is why jihad began to be understood as that outward military struggle, because it was understood as the way in which Muslims are going to spread their borders, conquer new territory, bring wealth into the Muslim world, and then apply the outward aspect of Sharia. And the instructive example that we find in this area is that of Imam Zainul Abidin. All of our Imams, they have teachings for us, very beautiful teachings, but they have different aspects that we can see best represented in their teachings. Imam Ali alayhi salam, although he is our role model in all areas of Islamic practice, but perhaps what is most unique about Imam Ali in all of the Muslim world and even among our Imams is the beautiful sermons he has on Tawheed, which no philosopher, no theologian, no poet, nobody can come close to beautifully encapsulating the Islamic belief in Tawheed and the attributes of Allah like Imam Ali did in his sermons. Now, all of our Imams, they have teachings about Tawheed, about Adl, about the sifat and attributes of Allah. But that is something unique in and very beautiful and powerful in the messages that we find in Nahj al-Balagha and in the sermons of Imam Ali alayhi salam. Imam Muhammad Baqir and Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhim as-salatu was-salam, we find their teachings to be filling in the details of our Islamic law, ibadah, practice, and the majority of hadith about how we practice Islam, they come from our two Imams, Imam Baqir and Imam Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam. Imam Zainul Abidin was the Imam whose unique genius and unique gift to the Muslims is expressed in the spiritual teachings of Islam. The du'as of As-Sahifa Sajadiyah are a comprehensive series of du'as about different topics at different occasions. The spiritual message of Islam. Dua Abi Hamza al-Thumali also is taught by Imam Zainul Abidin, and it is especially recommended to recite Dua Abi Hamza al-Thumali during the nights of the month of Ramadan. If you are not a native speaker of Arabic, and even if you do understand Arabic, it is a long dua and it is a very powerful and beautiful dua. It might not be possible to understand that dua and to recite it in a single night. And so it would be a good idea to break up that dua, recite maybe a page, 2 pages a night, and finish it by the end of the month. If you start tonight and read a few pages a day, then you can finish the dua in 10 to 15 nights before the end of the month of Ramadan. That is one of the du'as that was taught by Imam Zainul Abidin. It's called Dua Abi Hamza al-Thumali because Abu Hamza al-Thumali was the companion of our fourth Imam, and he is the one to whom the Imam taught the dua. But this is a dua of Imam Zainul Abidin. And similarly, we have a teaching from our fourth Imam known as Risalatul Huquq. Many of you may have heard about this. This is the Book of Rights. So here, the Imam is, through his du'as in Sahifa Sajadiyah, through the du'a Abu Hamza al-Thumali, through other du'as, through Risalatul Huquq, he is giving us a sense of the spiritual structure of Islam, the inner structure of Islam. Before the Imams can teach us Islamic law, before we can say that we are going to create a political union, we have to make sure that the citizens of that political union understand what the purposes of their coming together are. If we are citizens, then what is the basis of our citizenship? It is not just our passport or our ethnic or our legal identity, but it is our spiritual identity. It is our devotion to Allah, the citizenship in the Muslim Ummah, not the political citizenship in a country or in a land. And that was what Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salam defined in his du'as. The basis of our spiritual affiliation, identity, citizenship. The nature of that inner jihad, which if we understand it, then we will be able to live as full members, as productive members of the Muslim identity on the material level, in the external life, in our words, in our actions. We will also be a good Muslim. But if we don't have that identity, then we might practice Islamic law, but our practice of Islamic law will not have the spirit, and it will not have the benefit that it should have. So what were some of these teachings of Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salam that refer to the rights of and the responsibilities that we have in our life? What are some of the teachings of Imam Zainul Abidin about the spiritual identity of Islam? Just to review the progression of our discussion, jihad is the establishment of justice and the eradication of injustice. That begins from within. And that is the basis of the identity of a Muslim. That is the basis of our belonging to the Muslim Ummah. That is the nature of the mission of the Prophet. Therefore, that is the nature of the succession to the Prophet. Those who thought of Islam and emphasized the administrative and political element, they also shifted the focus of jihad from the inner struggle to the outward struggle. But Ahlul Bayt preserved that focus on the inner struggle. So let's look briefly at Risalatul Huquq. Now, this is something that I encourage everybody to read. It is a very beautiful and a very comprehensive explanation by Imam Zayn al-Abidin of what are our obligations. The word haqq means right. It also means truth. But in Arabic, it is used to mean both right and responsibility. There is haqq laka, a right which other people owe to you, and there is a haqq alayk, a right which you owe to others. So every right is also a responsibility. They come together. And the word haqq means rights, but also responsibilities, because there can be no rights without an equal system and a parallel system of responsibilities. So Risalatul Huquq is the treatise or the book of rights, and it is the treatise and the book of responsibilities. And it's very beautiful how Imam Zayn al-Abidin discusses these rights. Let me just make one point, that this is narrated in different sources. Some of you may find in different languages, in English and Farsi, in other languages, the version that is narrated by the book Tuhaful Uqud. There is another version which is narrated by a Shaykh al-Saduq, and this is the one that I will be referring to. It's a little bit shorter, but it is more authentic in the narration. So this version of Risalatul Huquq, they're very, very similar, but there is a slight difference in some of the words. The shorter and the more authentic form of this hadith, the more well-attested form of this hadith, is the one narrated by Shaykh Saduq, which is what I will be referring to. And Imam Zayn al-Abidin mentions different huquq. He starts with the right of Allah. And the reason for that is that all of our rights and all of our responsibilities, they exist because of Allah. That is why, as a Muslim, we don't feel ourselves being pulled in different directions. You know, my wife wants one thing, my children want one thing, my job wants another thing, my parents want a third thing. Sometimes people feel like they're being pulled in 10 different directions. But all of our obligations, they are for the sake of Allah. If I owe something to my wife, it's because of Allah. If I owe something to my children, it's because of Allah. If I owe something to my parents, it is because of Allah. When I remember Allah and then I think of all of my other roles in life through Allah, then it's like beads that are scattered and there is a single thread that comes through them. Those scattered beads can become chaotic. But when there is a single thread and you pull that thread, then it becomes a very orderly and organized and a very beautiful necklace. So Allah is like that string that takes those scattered beads and brings them together. Ala bi dhikrillahi tatma'innul qulub. Through the remembrance of Allah, our heart finds tranquility. Because through the remembrance of Allah, I find the consistency and the harmony in my different obligations in life. So the first right that Imam Zayn al-Abidin mentions is Haqqullahil Akbar, the greatest right of Allah. Why Akbar? Because everything else that the Imam talks about is also Haqqullah. If I owe something to my parents, it's Haqqullah. If I owe something to other people in society, it is Haqqullah. Allah is the one who has obligated it. But the greatest right of Allah, the primary right of Allah, Haqqullahil Akbar, Haqqullahil Akbaru alayk, the greatest right of Allah upon you, أن تعبده ولا تشرك به شيئا. Worship Allah and don't ascribe any partner to Allah. فإذا فعلت ذلك بإخلاص, if you do so with sincerity and you worship Allah sincerely, جعل لك على نفسه, then Allah has obligated Himself. So this is the first is حقُّ alayk, the right that you owe to Allah. And then the Imam mentions what right Allah owes you. Allah will that haqq by giving you a right. جَعَلَ لَكَ عَلَى نَفْسِهِ, Allah will obligate Himself. He will have a responsibility and you will have a right, أَن يَكْفِيَكَ أَمْرَ الدُّنْيَا وَالْآخِرَةِ, to take care of your worldly affairs, He will be in charge. And to take care of your worries in the hereafter, Allah will be in charge. That is the first of the huquq mentioned by Imam Zayn al-Abidin. We will look tomorrow with some of the other hukuk in brief, and I request you to follow up and read Risalatul Hukuk for a reminder of those beautiful teachings of Imam Zainul Abidin. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.